Hey, it is your buddy, Peace and Harmony with you here today. Much love going out to all the beautiful empowered harmonizers. And we are zooming in and focusing in a little bit more in depth in terms of how to recognize that you are being targeted by a psychopath. Someone who appears like the everyday Joe, the everyday Sally. They can be good looking, they can be very good looking, they can be the run of the mill looking individual, yet there's something about them that strikes you as quite odd, quite different. And there's a je ne sais quoi, there's something that you can't quite put your finger on. There's just something, the way that they carry themselves, the way in their demeanor, they're so cool, calm, collected. Yet they seem to, go against the norm. They seem to have something a little bit quirky off about them, and all of a sudden you find that these people are very endearing to others. And a psychopath, because of their ability to not experience, they call this ability or feel it as ability, whether you call it an ability or something good, is up to you. We're not going to use a judgment, good or bad. It is what it is. But to become aware that this person does not participate in feelings or emotions like the rest of us, i.e., like the 96% of us. It's estimated that between 1 and 4% of the population is psychopathic. So what's difficult to really understand and why it's so easy to fall prey to these intra-species predator is because they look just like everybody else. In fact, they might have a certain allure or attraction where people just can't get their eyes off of them. When you feel this sort of magnetic attraction and you can't quite sum it up, you don't know why. In fact, they might be good looking, but there's something perhaps very unattractive about them. You can't quite put it in, so it's almost like an ugly beauty, if you will, that keeps your eyes kind of latched on. You feel like your energy is getting latched onto this person, even though you barely know them, even though you just met. And you all of a sudden feel like the floodgates are down. Your typical walk of life, all of a sudden you feel at ease. You feel captivated. You feel almost as if you have been shot by a stun gun. There's something that you can't quite put your finger on. It is enigmatic. It is very enigmatic, meaning mysterious or puzzling, something intriguing about them, and you become sort of immediately wrapped up or engaged with this individual. And you don't know quite why, but you feel yourself slowly abandoning your call of duty, what you usually attend to, what you focus on. You tend to let little and little of your focus erode to this person. And you become immediately intertwined. In other words, there's a feeling like, I just want to touch this person. I want to be around this person. This person feels like the answer of what I've been looking for. There's this enigmatic oceanic experience which you cannot quite put your finger on, but you feel an attraction to. And you feel that your eyes are being kind of swept up by them, your senses are being wrapped up, and it's not just like, wow, this is a drop dead gorgeous person. There's something else. There's something else in the spectrum of this individual which you encountered, and this could very well be a psychopath. It is to understand that there are individuals who, even though on the outside appear to be very human, oftentimes very charming, oftentimes very attractive or intelligent, or find themselves or you see them, going up the corporate ladder very quickly, keep rising up in the family very quickly in terms of who endears them, who lets them off the hook. They could be like the golden child. But the key understanding is that even though on the outer experience they look quite normal, underneath is a individual that is wired to not participate in the typical emotions, love, compassion, empathy, freedom, liberty, the feeling of brotherhood or sisterhood, getting the sentimental meaning of things, being able to have a sense of nostalgia or true meaning. That what you might say is your life purpose or a religious understanding. So this is unique for each individual. But it is to understand, because this individual, of the wiring and the firing of their brain, the inactivity of the amygdala, which is the fear center, and then also kind of a disconnect. So in other words, the fear center that registers fear and that feels fear. In other words, they're able to, experience or portray fear, or experience fear. So there is really kind of no feeling of fear. So just imagine if you did not experience this emotion on a day-to-day basis. When you think about it, it's really what keeps you in line. It's what keeps you having a sense of conscience, a sense of right or wrong. No, I would not do that to a person. No, that's unethical. No, that's lack of integrity. That is a violation. So things that are very clear. To you, in other words, you have, it doesn't even register fear. It registers for you as a value. So it's to understand that the germination, the tiny seed, if you will, of fear that then kind of proliferates into all these other adherence to rules, values, norms, proper humanity of how to treat people, treating people well. Understanding this is not an experience for these individuals. So this void or this lack, and without a conscience and without the connection to the prefrontal lobe, which is the seat of sort of having a vision, responsibility, good judgment, there's a disconnect. There's not a connection. The cable wires aren't hooked up there within them. So in other words, there's this really sort of cold, valueless entity. You can call it a person because they appear to be, but really I would say, what you really feel to be a person, what you would think of a person of heart, humanity, all that's kind of in your regular categorization or how you would label this or categorize a person. There's really sort of a lack of personhood or humanity within this person. And so it's to understand that they can be all around, in your community, in your family, your workplace, your society, your culture, your politics, your church, your school. It is to understand that, even though there's an intellect, there is a really different person lurking within. And I say lurking because they are aware that they're different. They're aware that they're not cut from the same cloth as everybody, but they must require in order to appear to fit in. So because they don't experience this fear, they have a whole different experience when they look out at a party, when they look out at a job, when they look at an organization, when they look at a family, when they look at the bar scene, they're registering something else. And it is felt that the psychopathic individuals really have only, because of their high sensitivity to dopamine, which is the neurotransmitter that registers reward. In other words, for those of you, think of your rewarding experiences. A good box of chocolates, something that you really enjoy, something that's really thrilling and exciting for you. It could be a love relationship. It could be a certain place you like to go. You might get it from shopping. You might get it from food. There's a dopamine response. So this is a natural inherent neurotransmitter. But in the psychopath, studies have shown that there's an excess or a hypersensitivity to this dopamine. So these individuals who are psychopathic have been registered to have 5 times more sensitivity to dopamine. So they get on like a super reward activity. And this is kind of like, what causes their high risk behaviors. In other words, when they're really going for something, it's like there's no brakes on the car. They can get very into it. And we often see this sort of play out in a number of different things. So it can become, play out into violence. It can play out into taking advantage of people. It can play out into their ability to juggle a number of different relationships because they don't feel the fear. They don't feel that they've done something wrong. And they have, just really a feeling of aggression. So their palette of experiences or feelings are very limited. So whereas, I would say the 96% of people have, the feeling of love or desire or have a dream. There's something, meaningful or significant or nostalgic or sentimental to you. So all those feelings that you might have, they just don't have it. So as you can imagine, they have, a very limited repertoire of feelings, namely like aggression and just basically non-aggression. And so, and then this aggression, in other words, oftentimes there's also been other studies, and if you look at the work of Thomas Sheridan, he has a wonderful book and some videos, Puzzling People. Thomas Sheridan is out of Ireland, and he wrote Puzzling People, The Labyrinth of the Psychopath. And he talks about his experience with the population and how he feels that there is a high testosterone. So if you think of someone who is jacked up on testosterone and, has this propensity to be very rewarded, and then coupled with a lack of empathy or feelings, you can see then where this type of person would then be driven or have the neural network that wires and fires to put them on a high level chase to do what it is that they want and just go after what they want. So what they want is more objective in nature. So in terms of how you feel about other people, you might feel there's another person, we smile, you wave hello, look at the baby, oh my God, how cute, look at that bird, look at that bunny. Those sort of warm feelings that you have is lacking or absent in the psychopath. But there is a cover up of deceit that is very superficial in nature. So it's almost like an act or a facade, a persona that they are going to put on no matter what the relationship. And they have an ability to mimic others, study and mimic the feelings of others. Oh, look at the people holding hands. That must be what I do. Kissing them, fondling them, putting my arm around them. This is what I must do. And they're aware of then other people's reactions. And so it is for you to understand that this is how they approach the world. And that when you feel that there's something a little off, that this person is way too calm in the face of things that normally you would feel fearful, sad, or some sort of emotion, and to see that there's no emotion registering there, then you can understand that you have been targeted by a psychopath. When you have seen that, and then you get sort of a testy response from them, when they're just sort of eyeing you and just sort of, kind of taking stock of your experience, and then they'll make reflections back to you that seem very objective in nature. You're smiling at that. You're questioning that. Comments that seem to be kind of weird, and yet you're interested in this weirdness. It's when they're getting their hooks into you to see if you're going to continue to fall for their enigma. And you're going to perhaps, oftentimes, I would say, if you feel like you're experiencing a thought disorder, like how you normally think about things is all of a sudden abandoned. You're just like, you become an empty slate when you're around them. Not that you're just a captive listener and taking stock of things and kind of still feel a sense of your own presence. You feel really what I would describe, which is very difficult to understand or put words to, but for those people who have had the misfortune of brushing up with these people or having these people in their workplace, their families, their spouses, is to understand that when you feel this sort of blank slate coming, or a self-abandonment, you're not thinking in the ways that you usually do, and that you're being patterned to take on a very mysterious thought pattern which is not your own. It is because of those reasons which we described. It is to understand that the psychopath does not register emotions in the same way. So they're going to connect to things in life in a different manner altogether. So they're not going to have that emotional content, which when you really think about it, your feeling is what drives most of your reality. The food that you eat, the people that you relate to, the movies that you watch. There is a feeling there. And so if you have felt this, it's because energetically you're getting into their world. And this is where the damage gets done. When you are targeted and they see that you are green, naive, you're just following them like a zombie, you feel that you're kind of like in a new world, and you feel all of a sudden this lack of fear. You all of a sudden feel like everything is okay. It's because you're in the presence of someone, not that they're just stable or supportive or empathetic to you. That is another sort of comfort. When someone gets you and you're like, OMG, this person gets me, this feels so good, or we share the same interests, or we're interested in the same things. So that's a different sort of good feeling. I like this painting. Let's look at this painting. I like this pottery. I like this car. There's a similar interest. That's a good feeling. We're talking about something else. We're talking about when all of a sudden you feel this sort of draining out of really kind of your natural norms, your natural values, your natural organic way of thinking. And then you feel a sort of testiness of this person, and they might use other sort of enigmatic words that question you. You're questioning me a lot. I make you feel like the most handsome man. I make you feel like the most beautiful woman. And they'll test you with these statements. So this is sort of like, what I would call embedded word salad and embedded word test. So they get, it's very difficult, but I'm going to articulate it because those of you who have been targeted will know exactly the esoteric experience. And it's very difficult once you've sort of been in this altered state with them. I would say it's like an altered state, but it's not a positive altered state when it really starts to come down to it. The embedded commands. Did you hear me? I have one of these. In other words, whispers, sort of esoteric statements, testing you to see if you are latching onto their way of thinking, where they tend to twist and contort the meaning of things. A door handle no longer becomes a door handle. It becomes something else that's transfixed in your mind. There's the sob story, which oftentimes they'll latch you into. So if you feel that you're in the presence of someone who is really trying to latch you on to a sob story, making statements, I have nothing. I was left with nothing. My wife did this. I lost my job. I lost all of my income. These are what I would call sob stories. So they're getting you to feel for them, what you do best, correct? You, a person of sentient, warm-blooded nature, are up against what they call a snake in suit. And snakes generally are cold-blooded. So you have to realize you're dealing with a different-blooded individual. In fact, they might tell you certain things. I am dangerous. I have ice running through my veins. They might, sort of leak this out in conversation and then kind of laugh. You'll hear them tell stories, and they won't really have an expression on their face unless it's a learned expression where you're like, oh my God, why are you not flipping out about this? And then you might say, wow, this person has kind of like special abilities. So when you feel this, and the problem when you're being targeted is when you find this interesting, when you find it intriguing, when you make this psychopath your new home. And the feeling that you no longer feel like yourself, oftentimes I think for people is they feel like it's a respite. They're no longer in their everyday responsibilities. They're relieved of their need to be responsible of things. In other words, all of a sudden, you feel this carefree lack of responsibility for yourself. And then you begin to reassign this responsibility to the new relationship. And then, there's going to be the sharing of things, which usually is too private or personal, whether it's private photos, private information like their bank statement, their credit card, their debit card, their social security, their resume. They're telling you their family history. They're showing you their x-rays. little bit of information that is like you're slowly but surely, you're following the popcorn trail into their palm. And then once you're in their palm, they have you from there. They have kind of like a pity party, but they're not sad. They're telling you these grave states, and yet they're not flinching. And you feel that, oftentimes people are inextricably attracted to this people, whether they have met this type of person or before or not, because of this sort of, I would call it, an energetic field that people that they kind of modulate. It's hard to explain, but their energy seems to sort of take over a room, if you will, if you're not careful, if the organization is not careful, if there are not people who know what these types of people are, that this can be allowed to proliferate. Then you kind of see, cliques and gangs taking up around this psychopath individual. And they will then target people, i.e., if there's something that they want from you. It can be a relationship. For example, if you are an organization, they might look to buddy up with those who can get them places, get them information, get them a raise, get them an office, get them around these people. You'll see these people snaking through organizations, through the back office, through the back stairway. Things all of a sudden, they're in places where they should not be. And then other people want to kind of follow along. In other words, you hear that they have, been at this and this meeting. They've been up and up this stairway. They've been at this office. So in other words, and it's the shock and awe, and then it's like, what's wrong with me that I'm following certain rules, regulations, and norms, i.e., I'm not going there. And, for the naive, for the immature, they're like, oh, wow. And then they want to follow and latch on. And then thus we have the high risk behaviors. And if you are targeted for in the intimate relationship, then you're going to find yourself engaging in high risk escapades or adventures. These individuals have a high propensity to feel bored. So they're going to delight themselves with high risk behaviors. In other words, trying to hyper arouse you in a sexual manner when not appropriate, at the workplace, in public spaces, at the church. In other words, it ain't appropriate to be doing that or feeling that here, yet this person is going to try to seduce, entice, and get you aroused. Hyper arousal meaning where they're going to hyper arouse you sexually or hypersexualize everything, where objects and everything become sexualized in nature. And this is not a healthy way of thinking. It is important to understand that it can create a sort of very dense fog or thought disorder, and very puzzling yet arousing at the same time within the individual. So it creates a very lethal concoction of thrill, excitement, reward, happiness, feeling, a spiritual connection, yet a depravity, yet a disobedience. Depraved meaning against, against yourself, against your family, against society, just blowing out the gasket emotionally in what you should be standing for. And then them sort of controlling the dynamics and the modulation of the energy in situations. Meaning, you might see them kind of positioning themselves odd, sitting in odd ways on furniture, tables, the corners of rooms, gardens, positioning themselves so that they're perfectly lit underneath the lights. So, in other words, they're taking advantage and manipulating your perception through the way that they are holding their arms, their body language. They are getting people sort of in, I don't want to call it like a telepathic, but along the lines of telepathic command. And then because of this energy that's exuding from them, your eyes might also kind of play tricks on you, your ears might play tricks on you, your feelings play tricks on you, and you somewhat then, as you're with them, begin to tie this and connect this with the power of this individual. So when you do that, you're essentially losing your power to this person. This is a very threatening and scary place to be. And they are going to be seeing and watching how you react. So if you feel that you're being targeted and just this individual is just sort of watching how you're reacting. In other words, they're not engaging. They seem to be kind of scoping or assessing you out. And this can be whether it's in a business meeting, whether it's in a family setting, and they and then the feeling that this person is always on their phone, they're constantly texting, they're looking at you at the same time. These individuals can juggle simultaneous relationships and be one way to another here. They can have double and triple lives. Double lives meaning that they can pretend to be loyal, committed here, yet, on other hours or simultaneously they are loyal and committed to another love relationship, another job relationship. And so it's remember the cold-blooded mammal. They don't have the same warm feeling. So it gives them, this ability, if you will, to juggle relationships, settings that most people would not have the energy to do. So some people will say, wow, you are so good. You don't flinch and flail. You can do that meeting. Wow, you're so good. You can flinch and flail. You can cheat on that person. So sometimes people will be impressed by these individuals. And that's where the problem is, and really the falter of relationships or organizations when they are impressed by the wrongdoings of this person, the fact that they have no heart, the fact that they have, cold water running through their veins, not cold water, ice water. And it gives them this sort of ability to do things that most people would be prohibitive or find prohibitive or forbidding. Almost schizophrenic. In other words, sort of, not, of this world in the sort of a break from reality sense. And feeling once again that you want to think like this person, and yet you're being enticed, and that the fact that you find that they're wanting to partner up with you, or make you lose your train of thought, are ways that you're being targeted. The hypersexualization of things and taking you out of your element, taking you to places you wouldn't usually go, out in the forest preserve to do specific acts. Let's not do this meeting here, let's do this meeting there. And you're like, we need our computer, we need our this, and yet they're trying to tell you we don't need that. And then there seems to be a sort of lack of judgment on their part when you really get involved with them. And to be targeted on the hypersexualization, I know we have a lot of viewers who are asking about this. So the hypersexualizing of everything. So if, for example, if you were to, just sexualized comments, meaning that they might say things and sort of have duplicitous meaning, two-sided meaning to things. In other words, to have a shot of tequila can mean one thing. To have, I haven't had a shot of tequila in a while, and they're looking at a Hispanic woman, and there's this duplicitous meaning it can be something orgasmic from her, and then that is duplicitous meaning of like a shot of tequila, i.e., etc. I'm not going to go there. YouTube has kind of firm rules that we're not, too, what's the word that I'm looking for? We're not too, we're within realms, we're not too conspiratorial in nature or whatever, etc. So that's another thing. To see, the exit lights, the way you might see two lights, and then all of a sudden, those are equated to a woman that they're talking about, i.e. her, her chest or whatever. There's this duplicitous meaning where you feel that they're sort of, having too much fun and it's inappropriate. So hypersexualizing, sexualizing everything, including objects. I'm just going to leave it there, but I think you know what I'm talking about. And then everything then, and how they get people really, really stuck, is when in the love relationships, and it's the psychopath is asexual, meaning that they're not really interested in sex. Going back to earlier in our discussion, they're more interested in power. So if they can get power over you in this manner, then they're going to use sex to get the power, to take you down, to get you off focus. Just for the, they know that they're not in it for the relationship's sake, but to get you where they want you, that's what they might resort to. And so they have no problem doing this. They may take drugs, they might take male enhancements, whatever it is, and you're like, OMG, why are you, why are you ready to go? And it's like right now, it's just, you might have that experience. So if you're being targeted in that way, or likewise, if this is your parent and you find that they're very irresponsible, they just don't have any sort of connection to you whatsoever. They're late. They don't make dinner. They have no problem with the fact that they don't do specific parental duties, and they don't seem to feel regret or remorse. That's the other thing, is that they don't. You feel that they don't really learn from discussions. In other words, and they don't really hold on to emotions. So once again, like we're saying, something for you, you have an argument or spat. You violated me. This is not right, and you're trying to come to terms, and they're like appeasing you. And then, like, normally most people would still be heated up. They'd still have their feathers ruffled, and then all of a sudden, they're just like brushing their teeth. They're cleaning their ears. They're brushing their hair. Like nothing happened. So if you're being targeted, when you recognize that there's this disconnect, especially in, when you don't feel that there's an emotional congruency or, natural sort of playing out of things, and you're like, well, aren't you still mad? And they're like, what mad? Like, it's just not registering to them. Or where most people would be like, after this fight, we're done. For a psychopath, they're like, yeah, so are we going out for dinner tomorrow? I mean, like, they don't have any emotional holding on. They will not learn. And so for them, there is, they've done nothing wrong. So if you feel there's this complete lack of accountability, you're like, oh my God, how could you do this? This is almost criminal. It is that sense of violation. And I know we have a lot of viewers who say this should be criminal. Well, it's very difficult to enforce this sort of thing in marriages, in business. I mean, it's just, you need to protect yourself. So wherever you need to get the law involved, definitely get the law involved. And if you're being intimidated by them, don't be intimidated. You have, every reason to protect yourself, but get out of their realm, get out of their reach. If you have the ruminations, the nightmares, these are good signs and signals that you are being targeted by a psychopath. Where you sort of, you find that you're making things up in your mind. You're like, that mark means this means that. And, you see these sort of things that they're doing. I call it kind of like a psychopath calling card, where they might scribble things in snow